what's going on, guys? Chris, tech savvy agent. Got an awesome interview here, kind of an exclusive. I'm here with my man Matthew from the Corcoran Group in New York City. They are the largest residential brokerage in Manhattan. 18 billion, okay? 18 billion in annual sales. So you gotta love that. And I got a chance to meet Matthew at the Inman conference. We're kind of back and forth on Twitter. I thought it would be great to bring them on and let them share some of the things they're doing with you guys so that you guys actually have a chance to learn from kind of somebody that's at the top of the world here in New York City. So Matthew, first of all, how are you, sir?
Good, Chris. Great to see you. It's always nice to have that face-to-face, even if it's still virtual.
Exactly. We live like 20 minutes from each other and we're doing Skype. It snowed in New York
Well, this
today.
is only because of the snow, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it snowed. We have a good excuse. But, I've been following what you guys have been doing for a while. I think the first time I, was made familiar with Corcoran was when you guys were featured on Mashable, where they were just talking about, hey, look at how these real estate agents are leveraging social media. And I kind of got a feel for you, started following you on Twitter, started, fanning you up on Facebook, and now you and I, go back and forth almost daily. So I wanted to really cover really what I have down. It's going to come down to like three things. And that's one of the things I think that you're doing brilliantly is you're not just getting into everything. There's so many things that maybe you and I would agree are like a distraction. So the topics we're going to cover in the talk tonight: brand, mobile, and social. And that's it. And we're
Let's
just
do
going to
it.
go in depth with those to kind of give the viewers a little bit of insight. Hey, maybe I'm in Omaha, like, Brad Inman kept saying, you're in New York. That stuff doesn't matter where we're at. So, really,
Right.
Matthew, the first topic is brand, okay? And you've seen some of these conversations around brand.
Mm-hmm.
I showed you the Facebook update. Hey, what matters more, building your brand or the company that you work for's brand? And you saw the feedback, 100%, the average agent out there saying my brand. Why do
Right.
you disagree or agree with that? How do you guys look at it from the Corcoran Group?
Well, I think it's not really kind of like a clear cut answer, one or the other, really. I mean, I think it's ultimately kind of both. I think it's definitely possible to have like a really good balance between having your own strong individual agent brand inside of a larger, perhaps more wider reaching brokerage brand. But I think, one of the things that I saw in the comment thread was, one thing that occurs to me is that in New York, we have a very clear sort of differentiated set of brands. If you're at Corcoran and if you're if you're an agent at Corcoran, it means a very different thing from being an agent at Halstead. And the way that things like the websites or the social media initiatives are positioned between the brokerages in New York in particular is vast in terms of their differences. We do a very, very different thing from an Elliman or a Brown Harris, for example. I don't particularly feel that there are such strong differences nationally. Like, I'm not really sure. You and I were chatting about this before. I'm not sure that, even as a sort of insider, if you like, I really understand what the difference between a Coldwell Banker or a Weicker and a Remax really is. So I can understand the perception that personal brand is stronger than brokerage brand if your brokerage brand isn't really that strong to begin with.
Right.
So, if there's less of a differentiation between those things, then that's sort of when you get that kind of those agents saying those things.
Right.
But it's not particularly something that we see in the city, because if you work for Corcoran, I would argue it stands for something. It stands for, a level of customer service and sort of as a luxury brand, if you like. I don't really characterize ourselves as a luxury brand. It means something different than if it's Remax or something like that, I think.
Well, I think the thing with a strong brand, like, I think this is a good analogy I just thought of. Hey, Microsoft and Apple both make computers. But,
Right.
I mean, I don't think people think of those brands the same. I'm obviously a bit of a biased Apple guy, but I think of, I think right now when you think of Apple, you think new and sexy and modern and, cutting edge. And when you think of Microsoft, hey, even though they do both sell computers. So I know in
Right.
New York City, go to Times Square and tell me brand doesn't matter. So how would you feel then, Matthew? Let's say that we use the Brad Inman example. You're a realtor in Omaha, Nebraska. Okay.
Okay.
How do you feel? Like, what would your feelings be that you're working for a big brand, but you also feel the burden of creating a brand? Because doesn't that creating a brand, isn't that your job as the marketing director? Like, does a single
Yeah.
agent that has to list homes, sell homes, show
Mm.
homes, work with buyers, do their accounting, work their database, blog? How are they going to build a brand on top of all that stuff? Is it possible?
Right. I think it is possible, but it's a lot of work. I think if you're willing to really make a commitment to building a brand, then it can reap very, very large rewards for you. But building a brand, it's not an overnight thing. At Corcoran, we're really only just sort of reaching some kind of like point of critical mass from when we rebranded 5 years ago. And, the Apple brand or the Microsoft brands, they weren't built overnight. And building an individual brand is actually much, much harder than building an organizational brand because you have to do all the work yourself. And that's really the big difference between a brokerage brand and an agent brand, is that the brokerage brand will give you the tools and resources to leverage for yourself, whether that's, tech infrastructure or marketing, insight, or all of the tools that you as an agent can leverage underneath that brokerage brand.
And then I guess my other question would be, do consumers even, like when we talk about building a brand, I think that a lot of agents are caught up on building a personal brand. So it's the
Right.
Chris Smith team, it's Chris at chrissmith.com. If I just said, hey man, you work for a company that does 18 billion annually, I'm going to pay you to consult me. What would you advise me from a brand building perspective in a smaller local market? Would you advise that I become Chris Smith, the brand, Buddy King from American Beauty? Or would you kind of, like, you guys are the Corcoran group, and I'm pretty much in love with, like, the Good Life team, and I really love
Okay.
what, like, M Realty's doing, and Nest Realty, and,
Right.
the Phoenix real estate guy. Like, it's not about Jay Thompson. It's about this brand, So what would your advice be? Do I go personal brand, or do I come up with something like what I did, tech savvy agent? Right. That's more of a
Right.
kind of a So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a balance really, because in our particular industry, personal brand is actually very, very powerful because we're in essentially sort of relationship driven business. So that one-on-one interaction is where I think people tend to start getting confused about building personal brands. But one of the things, I'm a big believer in is that there's a real problem with people's attention span. I feel like I'm bombarded with brands all day long, especially in New York. You get the Times Square example.
Yeah.
So to get people's attention and really have something recognizable and stand out and sort of stand for something, which is really where you're sort of talking about building a brand, is that to have something recognizable and sort of solidified in people's heads of what it means, is really difficult to do quickly, I think. So I think that, building a brand can be very, very powerful. And the big piece of advice I would give is that you have to be kind of consistent with your approach, and you have to be different from everybody. Like Apple, for example, to use your earlier comment, they didn't go out and do exactly the same thing as Microsoft. They didn't get into, particularly like the software business, for example. They weren't really interested in that. Or when they came out with the iPod, they weren't the first people to come out with an MP3 player, but nobody had ever seen an MP3 player that didn't have any buttons on it.
Right.
So as a brand, they stand for, beautiful design and innovation and, ease of user experience.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why that can't translate to a real estate brand, I think.
No,
And
you're
for
right.
us at Corcoran, like a key thing that we believe differentiates us is we have this idea that when you look for a property with us, that it's much more than the apartment itself, that it's what's around the apartment, like what the neighborhood is about, is just as important as the sort of four walls. So we have this sort of beyond the four walls idea.
Yeah.
So you'll see us post a lot of things to do with what's nearby, which is actually why mobile is like a really great fit for us.
Yeah.
So I think sort of inherently the idea of like real estate brands and like, searching for listings on a real estate brand's website is inherently dull. It's usually check boxes and drop downs.
Yeah.
But if you can enrich that experience with other content from other sort of content verticals like food or shopping, then you really start to stand for something different, and you start to stand for something helpful, which is ultimately where I think you can, build a brand.
Well, that's what I believe in, is the more people that you would kind of in their mind give them a reason to say thank you, the more likely you are to get their business. I mean, I know that if I'm a person following Corcoran on Facebook or Twitter, you guys are giving people a reason to hit like or say thank you because you're profiling the diner or whatever it may be.
Right.
So I think that's a great approach. And then just one last thing on, you guys obviously have a huge brand. What would your advice be? Let's say I've been in the business 20 years and I've actually done a great job of building my brand offline. Okay? That, in my opinion, doesn't matter when you move to the web. So, and you mentioned earlier, like you are the director of internet marketing, and then the director of print marketing is sitting next to you. So,
Right.
what would your, just 1 minute on what is the difference between offline and online brand building? I really just feel like it's more what you mentioned earlier. It's more of a marathon online than offline. And I think most
Right.
people think on the internet it's the opposite. It's the get rich quick. Buy a
Right.
$5,000 website and you're good, right?
Right. I mean, the irony of what we do online is that we consider it a huge win if we translate online to offline. The more people we can put in direct contact with an agent face to face, like that's sort of the bottom of the conversion funnel for us.
Sure.
So that's sort of the irony of the online offline conversation, is that all the things that we do are geared towards offline interaction. But I think to answer your point, like the sort of commoditization of agent searches, or like if you're looking for an agent, very often what you get presented with is like a gallery of headshots, and there really is no differentiation between any of those guys. So you could end up with something like somebody incredibly successful that's a 30-year veteran, or you could end up with somebody that's a 30-year veteran but never really sold anything.
Yeah.
But in the gallery they kind of look the same. So brands kind of disappear.
The prettiest one.
I guess so. Yeah. So I think brand, once it starts to interact with search, which is sort of like where people start, brand can be very, very powerful for you, because I would argue that if that was, Corcoran versus, other brands in search, that you'd be able to see what the differences are. And that's certainly how I shop, for example. Like if I see something at Target, it means something different to me than Walmart.
Right. Exactly.
So
that's a good example. So brand matters, and that's what I covered in the queue the other day. It does matter, and I think if you're an agent watching this and you're wondering how do I create the Corcoran Group in my market, I think the takeaways that I have: number one, you need to be very patient. Number two, you need to be very strategic. Number three, you need to work really, really hard. And then number four, you need to make sure that you're differentiating yourself from anything else that's out there. So don't try to be the Good Life team part two. Don't try to be
Right.
the Corcoran. You need to find your own niche and take that example of what these guys have done. So that's going to take us to topic number two, which is kind of really this is how I'm making my living right now is mobile. Everybody wants to talk about mobile. Some of my presentations on apps and iPads, and I have all kinds of opportunities coming towards me because of my kind of knowledge of the mobile space. But I think you guys are doing mobile as well or better than any real estate company in the country. And I'm actually including the big brands in that comment, okay? So I don't want to get in trouble with any of them, but Corcoran is doing a better job than you with mobile. And, number one, why are you guys so focused on mobile, Matthew?
Well, in many ways, like a lot of what we do in terms of our tech initiatives or our marketing initiatives, I should say, because mobile for us is really more of an extension of marketing than tech, is sort of problem solve and problem solve from the brand premise. So we've been talking about brand this evening. This idea of what's nearby or what's around the listings is actually a much better fit in mobile than it is on the desktop. This idea of like having this GPS layer where you can see what's near you is really, really powerful. And, we see, all the trend reports and all the analytics about people's relationships with their phones and how much time people spend with their phones, especially versus, the big gray box in the corner of their desk.
Yeah.
And those things are predicted to sort of, surpass computing. The use of the web is going to surpass desktop computing in the next sort of 4 to 5 years, maybe even sooner. So, people's relationships with their phones it's a much more intimate relationship than you have with your laptop or your desktop computer. And especially when you pair it with a sort of near me idea, that seems to be a very powerful platform for us to share and distribute our content, whether that's listings or anything else that we do. So the idea of being in people's hands and being able to sort of share the information with us is a really great fit for us. So the first thing that we did was develop. We have our own iPhone app, which is about 14 months old now, okay. and we also have an Android app as well.
And that's brand new, right?
It's about 3 or 4 months old. But the great thing about having the Android app is that we have Google Analytics baked directly into the app, so we have an unprecedented knowledge of what people are doing on the phone.
Yeah.
Which is it's amazing to compare that versus the desktop.
Well, I know you were in that session that I was in with Max from Realtor.com and Zillow, and I think it was like HGTV, a couple other people, but there was a stat in there that 20,000 properties per hour were being looked at in that Realtor.com app. I mean, when I saw that, I'm just like, wow. I tweeted that.
Absolutely.
15 people were like, what? So do you have any data on, like on the iPhone app, do you have any data on the number of downloads? Or, is it worth sharing? I mean, I know it's harder to get the data from Apple than from Google. So a lot of people have downloaded that app. I mean, by the way, how do they get it? They just go to iTunes, right? Corcoran.
Yeah, we're in the App Store. You can just search for Corcoran or New York Real Estate. And
it's free and it's awesome, you guys. So not only can I go in and actually link up with them on YouTube or whatever, about me, contact us. I mean, they have the videos built in. They have all kinds of hyperlocal content. One of my favorite things was like, I was just playing around there today. I can go into Brooklyn and I can go into like the monthly market report and I can get some really great data. So, what has the feedback been from that perspective? And then I guess number two, again, should a single agent really be out there developing an app? I mean, those things are expensive, right?
They can be. I mean, it depends what you do, really, I think. And, I think app development is sort of at the stage that we were maybe 15 years ago with websites where, there was like a big cost barrier to having a website. And I think, over time, there'll be a little bit more sort of off-the-shelf app development type stuff. or the technology will catch up where the web on the phone will sort of preclude the need to do app development.
Yeah.
But I think, in terms of what we see with mobile, we're the little guy in terms of like real estate brands. We're the little guy because we're a local brand centered in New York, the Hamptons, and South Florida. But our usage is mainly urban, and really in Manhattan and Brooklyn. So we don't have the numbers that like a Zillow or a Trulia app has. In total, we're about 25,000 users, iPhone and Android combined. But for us, it's phenomenal because it isn't really about the download rate. It's what those people are doing. It's sort of like the social media argument. It's not the number of fans. It's the the metrics of engagement.
Yeah.
But for us, mobile, they're like our super users because one of the key things that we see, which is, I was just sort of blown away when I heard this, when I saw this statistic, is that our mobile users use our app 3 times longer than they use the desktop website.
Yeah.
3 times longer they're in the app. Now, I would have thought it would have been the other way around, that more people would have been on the desktop. But because people are spending longer using their phones in general, the usage numbers are actually off the charts in terms of somebody's attention span. So if you can hold somebody's attention for that long, and you're the only thing that is in their hand, it's the only thing they're looking at, it's a phenomenally powerful brand experience to our previous conversation.
Yeah, and
so
then also one of the things I love is like you can actually if you update the app, they get like it's like a drip marketing thing. Hey, we updated the app.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like you just keep reminding them. But, if you think about kind of what you just said there are unlimited things that I could do right now being on this MacBook. But when I'm on my iPhone, I have Safari, but typically I'm going into my apps. And if you're one of the 30 apps in my device, there's a good chance I'm going to go into that app pretty frequently. And then again, especially if there's content, it's being updated, it's got all this cool stuff, with location. So, the other thing you have to realize, guys, is only 30% of people have a smartphone so far. So, what's going to happen in, like you said, 1 year, 2 years out? This thing's going to blow up, and it's just going to be. You're right. The stat is by 2013, there will be more of these that have web access than there are computers, and that's like 23 months from now. It's not like we're talking about the Jetsons. So I think mobile's a huge space. You guys are doing a great job. Everybody that's watching, if you have an Android or an iPhone, definitely check out the Corcoran app and just play around in it. Let us know what you think in the comments below. So we have to move on to social. So we covered mobile, we covered brand, and now we're going to cover social. And this is probably the one, we read a post today on Inman that it was kind of like, I felt like I went back 3 years when I woke up. After, it's kind of that argument that there's no reason to use Facebook for business. And the point would be, you guys have seemed to laser focus on 3 platforms, which would be, in my opinion, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So, and I know you have the blog, but we're just talking more about, the stuff that's out there for the world to see, not the stuff that's on your site. So when you hear somebody say that social media is a waste of time or that there's no ROI, and you get some of these old school coaches, saying just quit right now, don't use Facebook, leave it alone, it's not for you, it's for the kids. How do you react to that? Because you guys are doing what I would consider a great job with social.
Well, thanks, Chris. I think the perception that you shouldn't do social media is actually more common than maybe you or I think, because you and I live and breathe that world here. But the idea of everybody having to do social media or thinking that they should do social media is always something that I've been sort of uncomfortable with. Yeah. I believe that it's not for everyone, but I do think that it's an incredibly powerful tool, and it is very much something that you should know about and dedicate the time towards growing your business with. Now, that isn't possible for everybody, I think. There's some people that are either unable or unwilling to invest the time to grow relationships digitally.
Yeah.
I think, and that's a big transition problem for the real estate industry. I think is trying to translate sort of the referral business into like a digital format. But I would say just personally, as I think Mike McClure said this best, is that the relationships that I personally formed through Twitter in particular, but also on Facebook, I had never met most of the people that I ran into at the Inman conference. I'd never met them in person, but I actually had sort of quite a familiar and close relationship with them online. And when I met them, Mike sort of phrased it this way. He said, "I didn't get a handshake, I got a hug."
Yeah.
And he sort of phrases it as meeting old friends for the first time. Yeah. Like if that's baked into your business, that's a very, very powerful proposition, I think. So,
well, listen, man, I'm getting that. I mean, that's why I don't even like having the conversation. It's like, I think what you said probably is the best approach. Either do it or don't. Either do it or don't.
Right.
Because the people that are doing it, like Mike and like you guys, and like, man, you talk about a hug. I mean, I probably have a couch in any living room in the country right now. People would let me sleep on their couch.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah. And, not just a hug, and hey, they want to take their picture with you, and they want to, record you. I mean, that is powerful. And I think part of that is just interacting a lot. But I think another part of that is something I want to talk about, which is video, right? Because you guys are doing a lot of great stuff with YouTube. What is your advice on video, and how do you guys use video at Corcoran? Because I mean, I could just imagine some beautiful videos of, some really nice properties. But one of the things I noticed on your site, there's a lot of videos of just you guys talking.
Yeah. It sort of goes back to that brand differentiation conversation that we're having, is that when we were thinking about our video product, it was really as an extension of what we were doing on Twitter and Facebook, really. What we wanted to do was a sort of non-traditional real estate video product. And when you think of real estate video, it's usually like home tours or agent bios and, or the agent sort of, touring the property and peeking in the closets, that kind of thing. And we wanted to do something very different from that because, quite frankly, everybody does that and it's sort of expected. So we thought, well, how is it an extension of kind of what we're already doing, and how does it sort of solve a problem for us? So, for us, we were getting asked a lot of questions on Twitter, like, what's the difference between a condo and a co-op? What should I buy in a new development? How's the market in the Hamptons? Things like that. So we're actually, using those platforms to give advice and sort of guidance on things, so thought leadership, I guess. And what we came up with was to try to have our CEO personally respond to the person asking the question on Twitter, for example. So she says, Chris, that's actually a really great question, and here's what I think, the iPhone is going to be in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
And then those clips get
video.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, for us, it allows us to build an archive of question and answer material, which we believe is actually more helpful than a property tour in the long run. And, for us, we see a lot of, we hear a lot of the statistics about video in general. We looked a lot outside of the real estate category for what we were going to do. And one of the things that we kept coming back to was how huge how-to videos are online. It's like the most viewed type of video is a how-to video. And we said, well, this is really, we have a huge opportunity to kind of do exactly that. It's like, how do I pick the best mortgage?
Right.
How do I think about, moving to Manhattan? and to be able to answer that personally and build an archive of that material over, for us, the last 18 months or so, you end up with like a very, very powerful product and a very, very long tail of viewership.
Yeah, and then also no cost really, right? I mean,
just the production costs of filming the video.
Yeah, so that just goes back to what a lot of bloggers teach, which is if you get the same question 3 or more times in real life, film a video answering it, right? And
yeah, absolutely.
Again, that relates to my work and my business because, I would say over the last 18 months of creating some really good content, I'm almost at the point where every question I get now is, hey, you know what? We did a post about that, which is awesome. I mean, I love it because I can just send them that link and I know they're going to get a great response. And that's another really interesting thing. So like one thing I think we would both agree would be like the shelf life of doing those videos is going to be a lot longer than the shelf life of like a tweet, right?
Very much so, very much so. I mean, we still see things from, a year ago that we posted still getting strong viewership. And the great thing, I would argue about working with something like YouTube is that you have a very, very detailed set of analytics baked into it. And it'll tell you, we use it to coach our CEO in responding to the people on camera, because we can tell that the viewership tends to sort of die off when she starts to deviate, or if she's umming and ahhing, and we can tell when people are starting to leave the clip in YouTube.
Right.
So we're actually using the data to coach the response, and that's like a very, very powerful thing. And so for us, like the goal is to make somebody watch until the end, which is quite a difficult thing given people's lack of attention, I think.
Yeah, well, trust me, half the people aren't watching us right now anymore. Yeah, but again, that's the reality of online video. Keep it short, keep it concise, and I think this interview is worth doing because you guys have so many innovative ideas, and the people that are still watching are obviously still learning. So let me just ask you just a simple yes or no question. If the advice that I'm giving, and this is the advice that I'm giving right now, my advice is that until you have actually figured out how to properly leverage Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and a blog, don't start looking at anything else. Would you agree or disagree? If you're going to be part of the social,
right?
If you're not doing any of that stuff, we're not even having that talk. But are there things that you would advise me to look at outside of those 4 platforms: YouTube, Twitter, blogging, and Facebook?
No, I wouldn't. My advice would actually be to go even smaller than that. And if you're thinking about any of this stuff, just do one. Just do one really, really well. A lot of people think that they should start with Facebook. We actually started with Twitter. And it was only maybe like 6 or 7 months after we started Twitter that we grew that into Facebook. But, we did that because we had a customer service problem with our website. We couldn't talk to people online. So for us, social media has always been about solving problems. Like we couldn't talk to people or allow commenting on listings. So, we're sort of evangelizing this idea of sort of transparency and openness and customer service, but we weren't really living that online. So Twitter is actually like a really great sort of solution to that. And then 6 or 7 months down the road with that, we're finding that the content curation aspects of what we were doing in Twitter, it's really quite difficult to do photos and video in Twitter, I think, outside of just links. So, what we decided to do was sort of like almost like a best of Twitter, and that became what we did on Facebook.
Right.
And then, I explained about the YouTube thing. YouTube feeds into Facebook and Twitter too. So it also is really sort of part of the same thing. But it took us like a good 6 months of just doing Twitter to realize that posting open house information or market reports has a very, very short lifespan.
Yeah.
And differentiating yourself and joining in conversations and building those relationships takes, a great investment of time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because you don't know this about me probably, but I did what you just said, except I started with Facebook. I built a Facebook page and I built a community there. I didn't have a blog and I wasn't using Twitter at all. And
Right,
then once I got to a certain level of engagement on the Facebook page, I said, okay, I got a lot of people that are interacting with my content, but it's not
right,
my content. It's Mashable's content. It's TechCrunch,
right.
right? So, okay,
Yeah,
now I need to do a blog. I knew I need a blog
right,
now. And then I did the blog, and I did the blog for like 6 months, 8 months before I did anything on Twitter. And even though
right,
I
right,
actually met Mike McClure. We had a lot of talk. I didn't really feel like I needed Twitter. I got Facebook and the blog. Well, once I learned how to use Twitter, which really just means talking to people, then I
right.
added Twitter. So I think that that's actually the best advice that people could take away from this talk is choose one platform and run with it. And you'll know when you've got it figured out. And then move on to the next because that's why people get overwhelmed. They go to a
Right.
seminar that I do, and I'm going to cover a lot of stuff in 2 hours. And it's all going to be exciting and sexy, right? But
I've been in those seminars, Chris. It is exciting and sexy.
yeah, thank you. Those are actually a whole different seminar that I do.
Ah,
No, but the point is, it's like there's a lot of people coaching and training, and you got guys like myself and guys like Ben Kinney and Maya and Mike and all these radio shows and all these different blogs and the guys at Thousand. There's a lot of information that's being thrown at realtors right now. So,
yeah.
it is a little bit hard for them to digest. And that's why I want to bring you on, man. You guys are doing what you do well. Brand, A plus.
Thanks.
Mobile, killing it. Social, you got it figured out pretty well. Video, you're using it for a very specific purpose, which is to connect with your consumer. And then everything you're doing is all geared towards let's get these people in front of us in real life and let's go show them a home, right? I mean, is that kind of the
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
so?
it's all geared towards offline.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's where some of the old school people say, "Hey, this is a relationship business." Well, I think you and I, and Mike and I, and Mike and you, and some of the people that interact. Hey, we're all real people online. Like I'm on Twitter, it's really me.
Yeah.
I'm really talking to somebody, and
Oh yeah,
it's just almost like when it's digital or when it's on the web, it doesn't count or something like that. I don't get that.
yeah. I mean, I think that was like one of the things that we learned earliest on with Twitter is that for the first sort of 4 or 5 months of its lifespan, our Twitter account was anonymous. It would just be sort of the voice of Corcoran, and until we sort of identified it as me and sort of said, you know what, there's actually a human here,
Yeah,
and who sort of has an opinion and
yeah,
has thoughts about and can give you advice.
right,
Until we sort of humanized that,
hmm,
it had no traction.
right,
But as soon as we said, this is actually Matthew behind here,
right,
and you can say hi,
yeah,
it made like the world of difference. And we currently don't have that in Facebook. Like our Facebook page is not Matthew. Like
yeah,
there's no like content curator. I think the folks that sort of have worked with me know that it's essentially me that's curating that content.
yeah.
But for us, it's more of a brand play than a kind of customer service thing.
Yeah, and I agree though because what I'm leveraging Facebook to do is I do get a lot of interaction, but it really is where I broadcast my message, I put out my content, and we
Right.
conversate around that. But that becomes a huge traffic source, to your site. And then I think the Twitter angle is a lot more one to one, B2B,
Yeah.
networking. So the last thing, man, I've really enjoyed this, and I appreciate you. Just so
Yeah. Me
everybody
too.
knows, that you won't be watching this, but it's 8:58. So me and Matthew are working late tonight. But just the last thing, man, is just two-part question. Number one, what's next, for Corcoran, and what do you see kind of where is all this stuff headed? Number one, and then
Okay.
number two, how can people get in touch with you guys? What's the best place for them to link up with you? Like if I'm an agent and I'm in Omaha, I think I want to read your newsletter, dude. I think I want to see what you're, putting
Okay,
out there, right? So,
sure.
number one, what's next? Number two, how can people keep in touch and follow Corcoran?
Sure. Okay. Well, one of the things that I do a lot of in my job is future trend forecasting. That's like one of the key things that I work on at Corcoran is where should Corcoran be 4 or 5 years from now. So we're very interested in sort of what's coming. But so I'll speak to that in just a second. But one of the things that I think that we need to do this year, for example, is we have a lot of stuff in a lot of different places right now. We have some of it working together and some of it not working together. Like all the mobile stuff that we're doing on Foursquare or in the iPhone app or Food Spotting and Koala, like all the different mobile platforms that we work on are all kind of joined together very closely, but sort of separated a little bit from what's going on in YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And then that is separated from what's going on in Corcoran.com.
Right.
So all these platforms need to interact closer, I think. So that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at quite a lot this year is how to bring all that disparate content together into either like a more powerful hub or get the content to work better across the different platforms.
Okay.
That's part tech challenge and part sort of marketing and positioning challenge, I think.
Yeah.
So, like I said, like a lot of what I do in my job is try to look at what's coming. So I think that, having this idea of the internet being in different places other than a computer or a phone is something that we're particularly sort of interested in. I think, the idea of the internet being in your TV is a really, really exciting one for real estate. And we're just sort of at the embryonic stages of that as a, technology wise
Yeah.
with Google TV and Apple TV.
Yeah.
But I'm guilty of doing this myself is that when I watch, the Jets, I'm on Facebook talking to my friends about the game as I'm watching it.
Yeah.
So this idea of like being online and watching something on TV is going to kind of merge at some point, I think, whether that's this year or next. But I think that kind of stuff is coming, and I think that's very interesting for folks in real estate.
Yeah. One thing I'll have to correct you on when you were watched the Jets. We have to. I was pulling for
Very
the
nice.
Jets. Yeah, I was pulling for them. So I kind of like what you just said there. So basically, what we'd like to see happen and where we need the technology to be is like if somebody were watching this right now on their computer or on their mobile without leaving what they're doing, it would be cool if they could tweet you right now, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
So the blurring of watching and doing things, especially with your friends,
Yeah.
is definitely something I think we're going to see a lot more
So I
of.
could write on your wall while I'm watching the video instead
Right.
of hitting pause or okay. And I think that is where it has to go because people love like and especially from a marketing perspective, like they're watching the video now. They're excited and
Right.
they want to say that you did a great job now. They shouldn't have to wait 3 more minutes till we're done to then
Right.
go to Corcoran.com to figure out where the link is to your Twitter, right?
Exactly.
And then
Yeah.
they click that. Now they got to log into Twitter, and they forgot your handle had an underscore, right?
Right.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay. So I love that. So basically, just kind of a melting pot of all the technologies that already exist.
Right. I mean, that's, as that kind of thing starts to happen, it becomes actually a really big user interface problem because you're talking about a lot of things happening all at the same time. So, I would love to see, for example, what Apple are going to do with something like that because
Yeah.
I think they do killer interface design stuff.
Right.
I think, what's going to happen with the internet and cars is also very exciting. The internet in your car, I think is a really, really big deal. Obviously there's like safety concerns with something like that, but the internet in more things in your house, I think is so exciting. It's so exciting.
It really is, and I think that's one of the things that the agents that watch us and the people that would still be watching at this point, the reason they're still watching is they love this stuff, man, right? I mean,
I,
it really is. Like I was talking to Christina Wise to use her again, but she kind of said, well, there was about a 5 or 10 year period where you just kind of laced up your boots and you went and you did real estate, and it
Yeah.
wasn't really that exciting. And now, number one, we've all had to kind of retool because of the market, but it's almost like I think that, and maybe this is a crazy statement, but the shifts and the changes and advances in technology have potentially affected people's business as much as the market conditions. And
Yeah.
I know that's true because I
Yeah.
meet the agents that have been in the business 30 years, and they're telling me that, hey, Chris, that neighborhood that I used to dominate, there's signs going up all over the place that aren't mine,
Yeah.
man. What am I doing wrong? And I ask them what they're doing, and hey, they're sending a calendar, or they're sending recipes, and
Right.
so that those are. I think that we're all blaming the market for some of the challenges, but I think that we need to look in the mirror and go, okay, consumers have changed, technology
Yeah.
has changed. Has my marketing changed? And if it hasn't,
Really.
look at Corcoran and look and see what they're doing, because I always have to use this. If you can make it here in New York City, you can make it anywhere, right? So
Yeah. That's true.
how can people connect with you, Matthew?
I'm on Twitter. I'm at Corcoran_group.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, you're guaranteed a pretty much instant response from there. We're on Facebook
Mm-hmm.
at facebook.com/the Corcoran Group. And we're on YouTube at youtube.com/the Corcoran Group.
Awesome. And the last thing I'll say that I love about what you just did, you don't even want them to link up on your main website, right? Because, that's the way I am. If I send people to techsavvyagent.com, what are they going to do? I got to hope they subscribe, hope they follow me.
Right.
If you link up with them in Facebook or Twitter, that's where they're at all the time. So, brilliant move by you, my friend.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, if I'm interested in speaking to people, and like I said before, like I can't really do that on the homepage of Corcoran.com.
It's very
So
difficult.
just go direct, I think.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for your time. Again, Matthew with the Corcoran Group, Internet Marketing Director, 18 billion in annual sales. So, hey, I don't think he gets asked about ROI that often. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Matthew. Have a great evening, and we'll see you guys again real soon.